Hello, this is President Nisbat C. Pal Singh. A very very good evening to all of you, and thank you all for joining us at our interactive session on travel risk management implementation, a proactive approach. This is our first interactive session. We were highly pleased to have a thumping response to our webinars, and this first session of interactive session started. In this interactive session, we hope the understand and understood caption is very clear, that try to understand and we will try to understand you. Understand and be understood. You can ask any questions and the learned speaker will be able to answer you. With these words, I say a few words about NISBAT. NISBAT was established in 1990 and we started with security, safety, management applied technology courses. After some time, we also introduced courses for the defense services personnel for their second career. With the passage of time, we started having a thinking on the process of starting a research and development cell. Now we are having NISBAT into 4 segments. The first segment represents NISBAT Forum. The NISBAT Forum is undertaking all webinars, all interactive session, all declamation, debates, every content, and also the award function. The second segment, that is NISBAT Academy or NISBAT Education, has planned to conduct virtual courses, virtual training courses on the subject of safety, security, and applied technology, management and applied technology. And the third segment, that is the NISBAT Enterprise, this undertake audits and verification and also undertake alliances and partnership globally. And the fourth one, we want to have a NISBAT Foundation. The NISBAT Foundation will be purely a sort of social work, because we want to help the society in understanding at large, particularly with reference to the subject of security and safety. After this words, I want to introduce to you the chairman of the moderation of this session, Mr. Pawanjit Ahluwalia. Captain Ahluwalia is our chairman, and he's also chairman of Ahluwalia Holding Private Limited Company, which has offices all over the country as well as abroad. He has been having, a daredevil approach always, but with all forbearance, all sort of patience, and all sorts of humane elements, he has been able to create a niche in the business world of India and abroad. He is a human, but seeks constant improvement in his employees and his business. He is a founder and founder member of International Business Research Association, Hong Kong, and is also member of the World Association of Detectives. He was the chairman come president of CII, Council of International Investigators, USA, and is awardee of Malcolm Thompson Award and Kotalia Award. Shri Pawanjit Ahluwalia shall moderate this session. I will say a few words about the subject, that is travel risk management. Travel risk management, as apparently everyone can see from the caption, involves all along protecting the travelers from any
I think we lost the president.
Yeah, once you can take on.
So what I'll do is I'll just sort of fill in for him. The subject is very simple. It's travel risk management, implementation, and proactive approach. And we would be having Roger Warwick from Italy speak to us on it. But before I go on, I'll just like to sort of say that this particular session is sponsored by Premier Shield in India and from Dubai, and is supported by Tag Scores, India Skills Private Limited, Premier Consulting and Investigations Limited, and JMD Cargo. Today we have registered participants from 13 countries, and I'd like to name the countries from where the participants are coming. UAE, United Kingdom, Russia, Switzerland, Nigeria, Netherlands, Italy, Pakistan, USA, Tunisia, Singapore, China, New Zealand, and of course India. So that makes it 14 countries where we have participants today from. This being an interactive session, you would see that there is if you have any questions, I would request that you please note them down and raise your hand. So when you raise your hand, I will unmute you and then you can ask your question. I would like to sort of say a few words about our president. Mr. Sipal Singh is a master's in English literature, and he's been a very senior police officer in the government of India. During his tenure with the government, he raised two important organizations. One is the Rapid Action Force, and the second was the Internal Security Academy, a central police academy at Mount Abu in the Indian state of Rajasthan. During his service career, he has been decorated with the President's Police Medal for Distinguished Service, the Indian Police Medal for Meritorious Services, a Police Special Duty Medal with Bar, a Sena Medal, and a number of other commendations and rewards. After retirement, the President of India recognized his services as the Security Personality of the Year in a conference in New Delhi. Mr. Sipal also is an advisor with the Asian Professional Security Association and the Central Association of Private Security Industry in India, and the Association of Private Detectives and Investigators in India. Mr. Sipal Singh's face is fairly well known across the country in India. He's a dynamic security professional, and he has appeared in several TV channels, and he's been interviewed for his opinion on various subjects. I now introduce our speaker of the day, Mr. Roger Warwick. Roger is going to speak to us from Italy. Roger's been in the security business for over 40 years. He is the CEO of Pyramid Temi Group, a security and investigations company which specializes in travel risk management. He is the chairman of Temi Group International, registered in Switzerland. And he is a certified ISO 27001 and 28000 lead auditor and a security management system skill examiner. Roger is also a founder member of the International Technical Committee for the development of the ISO 31030 standard, which is in the area of travel risk management guidance for organizations. He has pioneered the involvement of ASIS in international security standards and received the ASIS Presidential Award of Merit for the provision of information to leadership and encouragement of member involvement in the development of international security standards. He is a consultant to ISO, CEN, UNI, and European Commission on Security Matters. He is the chair of the European Union License Subcommittee. Now I would request Roger Warwick to take over the proceedings from here. If you have any questions, please note them down. And as soon as he finishes, when I notice your hand raised, I will fall back on you and request you to ask your question at that time. Over to Roger.
Thank you, Pawan, for such a lovely introduction. Don't believe half of it, please. Now, let's see if I'm clever enough to get the presentation up and running. Does that look right to you?
Yes, I think it's
as
fine.
a presentation, or as a, no, I need to switch. That's it. Okay. That should be the presentation now, I think. Okay. Now, the title of this is Travel Risk Management Implementation, a Proactive Approach. I've got 15 minutes to make a rather short and rapid presentation, an introduction to travel risk management, so that we will have time afterwards for us to receive your questions, and I hope we will be able to answer them. Now, the first thing when you deal with any subject is to be sure everybody knows what you're talking about. to be sure that everybody is on the same page. Now here we have three words, three very common words in the title, but they're words that have different meanings for different people or in different contexts. In the context of travel risk management, travel means any trip made for any length of time by people who have been sent on business by the organization. So if a member of an organization, which could be an employee or a partner, goes on a trip for the organization, this could be a trip of 1 day, or it could be a trip of 6 months. But that is the meaning of travel for us, from the time you leave to the time you come back. And so a traveler is a person who travels on behalf of the organization. Risk is a word that has many reasons, many meanings. For us, risk means any security threat or safety or health hazard that could be the source of risk for the person traveling. Now, risk has many other reasons, many other meanings we know, but this is the specific meaning we use for travel risk management. Risks to the person. There are also risks for organizations, which should not be ignored, but in the narrow context of travel risk management, we're talking about risks for the person. I'll give you a few examples. Crime, petty crime to organized crime, kidnapping for ransom, terrorism, cybercrime, political or religious or ideological activism, state oppression. The enemy is not always this physical person. The problem could be the regime. Depends on where you come from, who you are, and what the regime in that country thinks about the country you come from. So these are the risks that we are talking about. Management, we are talking about planning, organizing, staffing, leading, and controlling. That's what management is supposed to be doing. So what does this mean? It means, and we'll see this in a couple of minutes, it means that whatever happens regarding risk to the traveler is a responsibility, the accountability, the merit, or the fault of management, because we are talking about a managerial experience, not something that is improvised for every single trip. Implementation. The dictionary definition of implementation is the process of putting a plan into place in order to be able to create or control a situation. This means the organization should have made a plan. You can't implement anything if there's no plan to be implemented. So implementation, which is in the title, means we are talking about organizations that prior to any trip, prior to any travel, will have made a plan, not one at a time for each trip, but an overall plan, which is then integrated for the single trips. Proactive. Proactive means you're creating or controlling a situation rather than responding to it after it has happened. That's what proactive means. Proactive means you don't just turn up and hope for the best. Means you've already calculated the possibilities. It means you've already thought in advance what could be the consequences of the trip or whatever's taking place at that moment. You're not waiting for something to happen in order then to respond. So this means the organization should also be capable of putting into effect the plan. So you have to have a plan, you have to be capable of putting it into effect, and you have to be proactive. Proactive means, in very simple English, thinking in advance and planning in advance. Why do we need a standard? Well, the problem is at the moment that there's no internationally recognized standards for management. Now, we said that management are responsible, management are accountable. Any travel risk management has to be well organized and managed by management, but there are no guidelines. There are nothing in the world tells management what they should actually be doing. Now, this means that governments and legislators have a very easy time by saying that the responsibility is of management. So if anything goes wrong, it's management which has to face the consequences, apart from the traveler, of course. But there are no indications of what they should be doing. There's no benchmarking. There's no indication of what management should do to be compliant. Thus, we have created the ISO 3130. We started work in 2018, and it will be published in a few months' time. The ISO 3130 gives practical guidance to organizations with regards to health, safety, and security of individuals traveling for work. This will be the very first international document. And remember that a standard is not law, but in the 165 countries that recognize ISO, if there is no specific law, and there isn't, because no country in the world has a specific law regarding the procedures and the process for the safety of travelers, there's only laws for the consequences. If there is no law in that country specifically, then the standard has to be taken in, by law, has to be taken into account. So it doesn't become law, but it does mean that in a court of law, the defense can say, we have respected the conditions of this standard. We did everything that we consider to be, or not we, the world considers to be the international benchmark and international level of best practices. Now, we don't have time to go all the way through the standard. There's about 60 pages plus annexes. But what I'd like to do is just give you the list of the main chapters, and during the question and answers, if there's any argument here you'd like to delve into and ask for further information, I'll be happy to do my best. Okay, the standard starts off as is usual. It has a foreword, it has an introduction, it has a scope, it has its terms and definitions. But the first chapter, which I think is possibly the most important, is understanding the organization and its context. You cannot have a plan for travel risk if you don't know what how your organization is governed, what your organization exists for, the size, the complexity, and its context, and also its external context. How
I think we lost his voice, sir.
Yeah, we lost Roger.
I think Italy also has power problem.
It appears so. I think they'll jump back quickly.
We can share some people's experience, people who've been traveling and facing some problems. There are a lot of people who face a lot of problems while traveling. They can share their experience. If there are none, then I'll take on.
Yeah, if anyone would like to, just intervene in between till Roger comes back. Deepak, why don't you, Sapra, why don't you sort of say something?
So, not that Roger is not there on the board. So we were traveling to Italy, sir. We were taken on a course and we had this guide. There was a lady guide with us. And the first thing she told the group, please keep your passports and visas safely. So I thought we were in Europe and we were pretty safe. She said, there's a mafia here. There's a mafia here and they only look for your official document. In fact, this is one of the questions I had for Roger, that is there a priority if you lose your document? Because I've got classic examples where very senior officers have lost their documents. That is one. Secondly, when we reached Delhi, my own suitcase was missing. So we'd come back from Amsterdam, landed in Delhi, and everybody hunky-dory, and my suitcase was missing. I was not much bothered. The suitcase is gone, but all the shopping that my wife had done was in that suitcase. So there was an alarm bell, but very nice of people in Terminal 3. They told us, wait for half an hour. They tracked it. I never had a tracker then. We tracked it, and they said it'll reach your home by evening. And lo and behold, by 4 o'clock in the evening, I landed around 10:30 in the morning, 4 o'clock in the evening, it has reached over there. Lastly, anybody traveling for the first time or a non-Fauji, there are a lot of insurances, and I strongly recommend we must take all these insurances, especially medical. There are big problems people face while traveling abroad, and you have a medical problem. I know of cases where people had to pay through their noses. Others can share their experience. We can gain from that in the meantime, sir.
No, I'd like to point out, when you take a travel insurance and if you're going on a cruise ship, the situation is entirely different. Your normal insurance policy is not valid on on a cruise liner. And should you fall sick on a cruise liner, then you really cook your chips, because the cost of treatment on a cruise liner is very, very expensive. And a one-day hospitalization can be something like 8 to 10,000 US dollars. And unless you are careful in taking your policy ahead of time and ensuring that it has the maritime coverage, you can really sort of.
Roger is back.
Yeah, Roger is back. So Roger, you can.
Roger's back. Sorry about that. Where did you lose me? I think I was halfway through the list of the contents. Is that correct?
Slides, and we'll let you know where you were.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, I think we could easily move on to questions. I hear you've already started that way. We will talk about things that the audience is really interested in.
Roger,
the
why
point
don't you
is,
just walk through the presentation as you have made it, and we still have enough time to go through the question.
okay, we're towards the end anyway. Just let me see if I can pick it up again. Can you see it on the screen now?
No, not as yet.
Not as yet.
We were quite happy. Italy also has a power problem.
Yeah, well, there's a heat wave storm going on at the moment outside with all the trees bent over. So we
What
got.
are the contents, Roger?
And hang on,
Management
I'm
responsibility.
trying to.
By the time you get your slides in, I just like to talk about, when you're traveling and your purse gets pickpocketed or something like that happens to you on the street, that can be a very dangerous situation. And as a traveler, you need to know as to which is a safe area to walk around in the evening and which is not a safe area to be in. And especially when you go to an unknown place, let's say you go to Kathmandu also, if you go into the Freak Street area, you have a problem where you can lose your passport and your money.
We were in
You see, another problem which comes up is if you're traveling and you got to change your flight, say at Amsterdam or Brussels, you got to have adequate time between the two flights, the incoming flight and the outgoing flight. Otherwise, there have been incidents, I have faced it. At Amsterdam, the line was about 1.5 kilometers for the passport check, the passport controllers, they say. I went to the person concerned, I said, look, my flight is about to leave. He says, everyone's flight is about to leave. So another point while traveling is that you got to have adequate time to have your passport checked between two flights.
And also, since there are no announcements, you got to keep reading the board constantly as to, where you got to be going, because they sometimes change the gate and you could be sitting at the wrong gate and there's no flight from that gate.
Hello, can you hear me? But I can't see me. Sorry
I
about this.
you, Roger,
I'm
but
here
we
be-
can hear you.
Right, we're
Yeah.
back. Listen, I've heard bits and pieces of questions, and the bits and pieces I've heard all confirm that if the trip has not been well organized in advance, if the organization has not calculated all the potential problems before sending people to other countries, sending people to other environments, then you're asking for trouble. The question regarding airports, the question regarding insurance on ships, these are all matters that have to be studied in advance by management. And management, if they have the in-house capability of knowing what to do and what decisions to make is good. If they don't, they need to know where to look and who to ask. Because when the person is out there in the middle of nowhere and the last flight's left and the airport is not allowing people to stay in the airport, and problems of this kind, or maybe they turn up somewhere at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and there's no transport until 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. These are all things that should have been organized in advance. I think we can safely say that 90% of the problem of risk with travel is down to poor organization.
That is true. And one of the things I'd like to ask you, Roger, is how do you ensure proper communication with your travelers when they're traveling, from country to country? How do you ensure that they are safe in, let's say, an American is sort of making a trip into Asia and he's touching about 8 countries. He loses track of time. He loses track of which country he's in, what are the social obligations or how he needs to behave in that area. So how does one go about it and what one should be careful about?
Well, first of all, you need to be sure that your means of communication works in the country you are visiting. It's no good thinking this works all over all the world. Then you get there and you find your telephone does not work there. So the first thing you have to do is that. The second thing is you have to create a system whereby if somebody does not communicate within a certain period of time, then you have to start worrying. Now, it all depends whether we're talking about low or high risk destinations. If you're in a medium to high risk destination, the traveler should not be on his own anyway. He should have somebody with him, and this person that's with him, or at least is contactable in the area where he finds himself, should be able to step in and assist with communications. But the main thing, and it is a problem because cell phones do not work everywhere. Another important thing is you need to remind your staff to switch their phones on. This may seem obvious, but it's not. The few problems we have had around the world have been with people turning up on the flight, staff waiting outside to accompany them switching on their personal phone, which they had not given anybody the number of, not switching on their business phone, and no communications between outside and inside, and then something had changed and then there were problems. The basic thing is make sure the phone works where you're going. If it doesn't work, you can rely on satellite phones, but we know satellite phones are very expensive and they're not legal in every country. These are all things you have to look into in advance, not just a tourist who turns up and says, "Oh, I'll buy a SIM card at the airport," which may or may not be available.
Right. Mr. Suresh Suri, you have a question. Please ask your question.
Yes. Mr. Roger, I just want to ask you which functional level in an organization should be involved in creating the travel risk management? And second, who should be responsible to execute that travel management?
Okay. Now, this obviously depends on the size, the complexity of the organization, and the quantity and quality of trips. But remember, the person that is accountable and must give full support right from the start is the owner or the CEO or whoever is senior management. Whoever controls the company must be involved right from the start. This is not a bottom-up experience. It's not a question of middle management creating a travel risk policy, creating programs, and then going to the top management and asking them for funding, asking them for permission. It has to start off with top management involved. If top management is not completely involved, is not giving full support right from the start, then it's doomed for failure. Now, the second part of your question was who should actually do it. Again, it depends on the organization. If you have an organization of many thousand people who are traveling all the time, you should have a specific department with a department head. You should have a travel security officer, travel security manager. You should have a security analyst. You should have people who are 24 hours on call in order to keep in touch with people around the world. If you're in a small organization that just sends people aboard once a month, or maybe even less than once a month, then obviously you cannot be expected to create a full-time organization. But at this point, you need some external help. And your external help needs to be judged on their quality, on their experience, and on whether you can trust them.
Don't you think if the creator and the executors are the same, that will be more beneficial for the organization? The people
I'm not
who
sure
have
what you
created,
mean.
if creator and the executors are same, the people who have created the travel risk management strategy and the
Yes.
executor are same, both same
Yes.
person is.
Now, well, there's no potential problem, but we need to remember that travel security is a horizontal across the board. It does not just involve the people traveling. It does not just involve the department head of the people traveling. It can involve human resources. It can involve travel management. Now, there's travel management and travel risk management. Travel management is normally there to save money. Travel risk management should be there to save lives. But all these various people are involved. So you should have a nucleus who have been involved right from the start in creating the procedures, creating the program, and these should be directly involved. But you're going to have a lot of other people who are involved as well. What is important is these people should receive training up until the level of what they're actually doing. Too many companies provide training for travelers, but do not provide training for management. It does not make sense if you have travelers around the world who've been trained and management at home doesn't know what they're doing or why they're doing it. So you start off by training management. You train management in how to train people who are actually involved, but you cannot have, it's not like a specialized job in an industrial company where management doesn't necessarily need to know the speciality. Here, management has to know right from the start the principles, not all the technicalities. They do not necessarily know how to judge whether a security driver is a top-notch security driver or whether an armed security person actually has received training. They don't need to know the details, but they need to know the big picture, because at the end of the day, if something goes wrong, they will pay the bill.
Thank you.
And that's how you convince by telling them that.
Thank you.
Naresh Kumar, you raise your hand. Do you want to ask a question? Naresh? Okay. The next question, Mandeep, you had a question to ask. Please ask your question.
Yeah, very good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yeah. In the travel, this implementation, the people need to keep updated with the current affairs. Now, understanding how the threats are changing currently, how do we protect business travelers from the cybercrime?
Now, you want to protect the traveler or the organization or the company?
In terms of the travelers.
In terms of the travelers, cybercrime committed against the travelers as private persons.
Yeah.
Cybercrime regarding company information they're carrying.
Yeah, because since we are taking care of the entire total project, and the people are traveling, so we have to make the arrangement from picking up from the airport and then dropping them back with the entire safety. So how do we protect the what kind of a policy we could discuss with them, for protecting the business travelers from cybercrime, that they should not become a victim of the cybercrime?
Okay. But the only sure way to protect them is for them not to travel with their normal PCs and to not travel with their normal telephones. I know this is not practical, but it is the only solution. There's any other solution leaves the door open, because a few years ago, people would say, do not travel with your PC. But people travel with their phones, but their phones have as much information as the PC does. Phones can maybe be hacked even easier. If you really think you're up against a risk of this level, then you just buy a phone for the trip, or the company should keep phones to hand out to travelers for the trips with a phone, so they know the phone number. The phone should be completely clean, and also with just whatever numbers the organization thinks should be important. And the same thing with the PC, because if you got information with you and you're staying in a hotel, somebody, if they think it's important enough and invest enough, they're going to get that information.
Mandeep, the
There's no other way. There's no other way out.
phone is the cheapest phone is the safest phone, because if you have a smartphone, it is stackable. If you are just using a cheap phone, that is the best way to be
Certainly.
safe from all these cyber situations. So that's
Certainly.
that's the one simple formula. Next question, Pradeep Bajaj.
Roger, my question is, what is in the minds of most of us today? That is, the pandemic has had a tremendous effect on the lives of the people, and it's got a lot of unpredictability to it. Has the standard considered this aspect while making its clauses? If it has, which clause does it come in, or how does it cover the aspects of COVID-19, which is so unpredictable?
Now, the standard was written mainly before COVID-19, but it has been taken into consideration. But a standard of this kind cannot take a specific pandemic into consideration. It is an international standard that we hope will last for many years, so it cannot concentrate on a specific pandemic. What it has done is it's concentrated on behavior and training regarding what to do for pandemics in general. But it has not treated COVID-19 specifically, because it's changing monthly. This standard will be published in September, and it will not be touched for 5 years. After 5 years, it will be reviewed. So if we put too many details regarding COVID-19, we run the risk of 6 months later for the standard not to be up to date anymore. It is a big, big problem. What we are doing in Italy is that we are creating a supplement to the standard, which will be available, and it will be dealing specifically with COVID-19 as we know it now. As it's a supplement, it can always be thrown away after 6 months or changed after 6 months. But a standard is only changed after 5 years. It would have been risky for us to predict the future. Whatever we say about COVID-19 today is not the same thing we would have said 6 months ago, or even a year ago, even more so. It's a moving target. Every day something new crops up.
Thank you, Roger.
Commander Sharma, your question, please.
Roger, first of all, congratulations for 31030. And now there are a lot of people who travel on job for longest durations, and they travel along with their families too. So does the standard cater to their families also?
Now, the family takes into consideration the fact that people traveling may have dependents, because dependents mean they can be friends or family, people that depend on them. The standard takes it into consideration, but at the end of the day, the two things you need to consider are A, the laws of the countries involved, because some countries state that if a person goes an expat, the family of the expat is the responsibility of the company. Other Other countries do not take it into consideration. Some companies, as a policy, state that dependents are part of their responsibility. So it's a question of looking at the contract between the company and also the laws of both the country, the home country, and also the country that's visited, because things change radically from one country to another. Plus, up to what point are dependents to be protected there? Usually, large corporations will take out an insurance policy for what regards health problems, but for security problems, it's a one-by-one, case-by-case to look at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gurinder Bal, the next question is for you.
Hi, Roger. My
Hi.
question is in continuation with what Mandeep has asked. The entire travel risk management plan was in place and it was considered. All risks were known at the time of commencement of the travel. But what would be done if some emergent risk comes to knowledge while the journey has already been started? How we can tackle that?
Well, that's down to the efficiency of the organization. That's down to the organization or the external organization. If the organization is not big enough to have a full structure, it's down to them to be prepared to have a 24-hour call service at which they either manage themselves or is managed through a specialized organization. And the other thing is they need to be continuously up to date on what is happening in the area where the person is. Now, there are a whole number of systems. We use some of these systems where whenever there's a adverse weather, whenever there's a political problem, whenever there's a terrorist problem, whenever there's a political crime problem, we find out within a very short period of time that this has happened. We find out if it's happening in the same place or somewhere close by, or whether there'd be 1, 2, or 3 different events in the same area. At that point, we start thinking about what to do before the emergency happens. But this means that the company has to be completely or large enough to have its own infrastructure or use specialized organizations. I don't want to make publicity, but organizations like us who are continuously aware of what's happening all over the world. And we can provide this information to the company, and we can also provide assistance if and when needed.
Thank you. Roger, I have a question. Yeah. How important is meet and greet services during the journey of a traveler for his work?
Well, for the traveler, it's very important because the traveler feels safe, the traveler feels important, the traveler feels there's somebody there immediately looking after him. So it's very important for the traveler in that way. It's also important that the traveler does not leave the airport by the wrong exit or make other sort of mistakes. But we should remember that not all airports allow meet and greet. By meet and greet, we mean somebody that enters the security area of the airport, not somebody waiting outside. The meet and greet is a service within the airport. Not all airports allow it, and some airports will allow it one day and not allow it the next day. We had a problem in Libya recently where the day before they were quite happy for meet and greet inside the airport, inside security. 2 days later, other people worked for the same company turned up, and the airport had decided, or who for the airport had decided that no meet and greet could be done that day, which creates disappointment. But meet and greet is important, but it's important above all for the passenger to feel safe and psychological security. We're getting back to psychological security, not just the safety, but feeling safe.
Roger, another question is, how important is the choice of the hotel in which your traveler is supposed to be staying?
Very important, but it's not just a question of choosing the most efficient and safest hotel. You have to balance it up against where the hotel is located, because You could have the hotel that is considered the safest hotel in the world, but it's next to an American embassy. It's next to government buildings, which means it's far more likely to be attacked. Then you could have a hotel that is medium security, but it's in a safer area or an area without such obvious targets next to it. So at the end of the day, it is safer. Now, it depends on the sort of risk you're up against. Because if you're in the center of Rome, your risks are that somebody will steal your wallet when you leave the hotel, not that there will be a truck turning up full of explosives. If you're in a country where there is a risk of trucks turning up full of explosives or a terrorist attack, the most important thing is setback. Setback, which means that all security controls are done away from the hotel building. They're done just inside the grounds of the hotel. So if anything should explode, you're not going to have a effect upon the hotel itself. Yes, it is very important, but it does not mean that the safest hotel is necessarily the safest. But it doesn't mean that. So you have to calculate all these things. Generally speaking, an international chain is the safest. But remember that many international chains are franchising. So if you go to an international chain in Delhi, you're not going to maybe find the same quality in Colombo because maybe it's a completely different management, just the same way. Yes, very important, but it's a specialized job to choose the hotel safety-wise.
I just have a comment on the hotel choice, Roger. In one of the countries that we were operating in, the traveler was staying in a hotel on the 6th floor, and the local fire department did not have ladders that could reach the 6th floor. So,
Yep.
So these are matters of small concern, but the point is that should an incident occur, then the you don't know as to how to extricate a person.
But you see, we used to say, before there was so much international terrorism, always stay no higher than the 3rd floor, because the 3rd floor is easy to run down the steps, etc. That was the rule for security.
And
The
never
trouble is,
ground floor.
if there's an attack, like there was an attack at Bamako, where either with Kalashnikovs, they ran into the hotel and started running up the stairs, maybe you would have been safer in the top floor than in a lower floor. The other thing
Roger,
is,
I have a question to ask.
Yeah.
There are certain airports which are quite notorious in harassing the travelers.
yeah,
I've seen at one place, a person had gone into the duty-free shop of that airport, picked up something, paid for it. When he came out, there's a cop standing in the civil clothes. He said, "Show me your bill." Now, at the time of packing, the person who had made the bill had put another thing into the packet, which is not billed. Now, this fellow was in a quandary in a sense that they were asking, they say, you shoplifted, you come to the jail. They extracted a large amount of money out of that man. Does the ISO or any organization cater for these sort of things?
ISO does not cater for this at all.
ISO is a
Not
standard.
at all. This is a question of whether you should be doing mystery shopping. This is a question of theft at the till. But for the police to have been so wide awake, and for the police then to mention got into such heavy fines, makes me suspicious that there was some sort of cooperation. Now, you have to be very careful according to the country you're in, according to what sort of police, how trustworthy are the police in the country you're in. Now, that's something we do mention in the standard. We do mention that when you are making a risk assessment of a destination, you should also consider medical structures and police. Do research into whether police have been involved on a large scale in corruption.
Thank you.
You didn't tell me the country this was in, but I would imagine this is in a developing world country where there are problems of police corruption.
Roger, I'd mentioned a case in one of the countries in Southeast Asia where there was restriction on the amount of currency you can travel on person, you can carry on person.
Yeah.
And it was $5,000. And if you carried in excess of $5,000, you were supposed to declare it. If you declared it, there were people who were standing outside who would kidnap you or hijack you. And if you did not declare it and you were caught, you were thrown into jail. So, there are difficult situations that you can be confronted with when traveling. And so
Yes.
now it's slightly different with credit cards and things like that coming up. But there was a period of time where you had to carry some currency on you, and it was dangerous. If you declared it, you were gone. If you did not declare it, you were even then held responsible.
But
Pradeep,
the lesson,
to ask.
the lesson here is this. This is not going to happen in any country around the world. This is not going to happen in any town around the world. You need to gather intelligence in advance as to whether this sort of thing happens. If you do find that this is, and by you, I mean management of the organization, has to gather intelligence, has to know whether a certain town, Lagos, for example, has a bad reputation for this sort of thing. And that way you have to make sure that your person traveling has somebody with them who is a local person and knows exactly what the risks are and what can happen. So it's not necessarily a question of having a bodyguard, which if you need a bodyguard, it's a question of having a local person with local knowledge. I was at a conference a short time ago and I heard a lawyer give some very stupid advice, because he said, whenever you go to an African country, make sure you've always got some dollars in your pocket to give to the police. Now, if you're going to give a bribe to a policeman, you don't do it directly. You do it with a local person who knows whether it can or cannot be done. You, as a tourist or as somebody from another country, don't know. Never give bribes directly, because you will be getting into very big trouble. And if your staff are going to countries where the airports or the railway stations have such a bad reputation, they should be traveling with security assistance, at least for when they arrive. And then they should receive a full briefing locally.
I think that's very important, to be briefed locally on how you need to conduct yourself.
Certainly.
And
Well, what we do is we give briefing, general security awareness briefing to all the people that travel. But when these people are traveling to countries or destinations that are considered at risk, or it's not just a
May I
question
say
of
something more?
risk, it's also a question of if the culture is different. I remember when we spoke in Italy a few years ago, Pawan, and we spoke about the fact that some areas in Italy would be far more dangerous for you than for an Italian, because you don't know, you don't have the same cultural awareness. Plus they see you're not a local person. So these are all things to take into account, not just because you're going to a country that's considered dangerous. It could be a country that's not considered dangerous, but if you don't have the local knowledge, the local cultural awareness, you could be in trouble because you don't know the danger signs.
Mr. Sipal Singh, you had something?
I've heard some of the questions. One question, probably it has been already covered or not, because I've absent for a while. Roger, it is often said about any risks, particularly travel risk management, that any travel risk management has to have the leverage from the security and the fastest communication. How do you explain this at the time? Any risk management, travel risk management has to take leverage of security and fastest communication.
In an ideal world, yes. The problem is, this is what should happen. The problem is that very many organizations, the budget is not in the hand of the risk management, and it's not in the hand of the security people. And they very often do not have the authority or the finances to be able to do what you suggested, which is what they should be doing. Now, one of our biggest problems around the world in security in general, but in travel security in particular, is who holds the purse? Who's got the wallet with the money? Who signs the checkbook? And it's the man who signs the checkbook who decides how much you can invest in what you're doing and the leverage you have. I'm afraid security people around the world, with very few exceptions, do not have much leverage. This is a big problem.
Okay,
But for any
Roger.
crisis management, hello?
Hello. Now, how many now when
For
I
any
give talks to big
crisis
companies,
management, for
Yeah.
any crisis management, I think ultimately you have to depend on the communication for any, I mean, supposing you are in the box or inbuilt in your travel risk management, you may not have put in the box this much communication, but supposing they are en route and something arises, then how do you have that, already built in problem where you have a fostered communication? You have built in something in your risk mitigation plan. Do you have a built-in system for
now
communication?
again, being realistic, I can tell you in theory what should have been done and what should be done. In practice, I find that when I give meetings with very large international companies, and maybe we have a meeting with representatives from various companies, I say, who has a crisis management team? And they all put their hands up. Then I say, who are the members of the crisis management team? Who does what? Who has the power to sign checks? Who is an expert in communications? Who is an expert in security? All of a sudden, we find that the crisis management team has just been named, because you must say you have a crisis management team, with very few exceptions. And this is why we say in the standard, and we've been saying for years as well, because a lot of the stuff in the standard is the same thing that we have been advising for many years, that right from the start, you must have top management, and top management must be involved in crisis management, because crisis management means you have to make decisions immediately, which possibly are not in line with company policy. So if you don't have somebody from the top there with the authority to do it, you have to wait, and then waiting is possibly too late. The authority to get a helicopter from one country to another or something like this, if you wait a few days, it's too late. Everybody else has taken the helicopters.
I see.
Make a
Go ahead.
point.
Well, Pradeep,
Understand.
Roger, I'll just make a point.
sir,
Sir.
the last question goes out to Pradeep Bajaj. We are running out of time.
This is not a question, Roger. This is just an observation. I think one of the things which is very important while making a travel plan is to make an assessment of the political or the security situation in the area the person is going to travel, particularly the surface part of the travel. So, so it could be like in the hostile areas or terrorist infested areas or so. So this is something important, and I wanted to just talk about this.
Of course, it is very important, but also important is the profile of the traveler. Don't forget, a place is dangerous for one person, but it's not for another person. It's the profile of the traveler, how the traveler presents him, herself to the rest of the people around there. So it's not just the level of security of the area, but the way. Now, if I go to a train station at very late with my blue suit, my tie, a bag and a raincoat, and it's after midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I come out of the train station and then walk to my hotel, which is maybe just 500 yards away, I'm at very high risk, because I look like a perfect target. I look like a target that has money, that is not capable of defending himself. I'm a perfect target. If at the same time, a 15 or 20-year-old lad dressed in jeans and t-shirt comes out of the station and walks to a hotel, nobody even looks at him. So it's not just a question of the place that is visited, the time of day, the situation, but it's also a question of what do you look like to them? The whole point of security is you have to understand what your adversary sees in you. It's not so much what you see in them, it's what they see in you. And do they see you as an easy target, or do they see something not to be interested in? Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank you, Roger, and now finish off any question and answers because we run out of time. And over to Mr. Sipal Singh for his closing remarks now.
I think I missed part of the session, but I think it was a very scintillating session as such. A number of questions have been asked, number of doubts have been cleared, and we are thankful to Roger for having clarified all the doubts. In fact, I was myself very doubtful that how will you have it, but after your explanation, I became abundantly clear how the system works. Normally, we people think as a package sort of thing, but this package involves a lot of small things which you have put in. And particularly, I must appreciate your patience that any type of question asked to you, you have replied in a very smooth and patient manner without getting irritable. We thank you for your kind deliberations, and we hope to see you again in one of our interactive session or in one of our webinars. Thank you very much, Roger, and thanks all the delegates who have been here.
Thank
I'd like
everybody.
to say,
Thank you so much.
thank you so much, sir. I'd like to tell you about our next webinar. Kindly see the banner,
Okay.
and you will know it is very interesting again that it is about the business of, hiring and firing is a risky business in today's era. Of course, today's era, make a note, COVID situation or many things else. And we have got two eminent speakers. Both are very eminent in their field. One is from UK, one from India, and it is scheduled as it is on the 9th, and we hope to see you all here on this particular webinar. Now, after this webinar, we'll have next, that is another interactive session, that is understand and be understood, and we'll come up with that. First, let us attend this particular webinar on the 9th and enjoy this deliberation. Thank you very much, everyone who is present there. I'm grateful to you for having come and shared this interactive session on understand and be understood. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Pawan. All the best to the family. I saw Jasjit somewhere.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you. Thank you,
so much.
Jasjit.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you,
Goodbye,
sir.
everybody.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Roger, thanks everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
People say you're sitting in your car.
I think so, sir.
Yes.
New Chandigarh has no electricity. Okay, ji, bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Bye, bye,
Bye,
see ya.
sir. Bye, sir.
Bye-bye. Bye, thank you.
Bye, bye, bye.
Yeah.